Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the training field at Naval Base Coronado, watching the morning exercises with her arms crossed. The California sun had barely crested the horizon, but the heat was already building. She'd been stationed here for 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks, she'd learned one thing clearly: nobody wanted her here. "Look at her, standing there like she owns the place," a voice carried across the morning air. Sarah didn't need to turn around to know it was Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hendricks. He'd made his feelings about her known from day one. Sarah was the first female officer assigned to the K-9 unit at this particular SEAL training facility. She'd earned her place through years of hard work, top marks in tactical training, and a natural gift for working with military dogs. But none of that seemed to matter to the men who'd been here for years, treating the base like their own private club. "I give her 2 months before she requests a transfer," another voice chimed in. That was Lieutenant Davis, who'd made it his personal mission to undermine her at every opportunity. Sarah kept her eyes forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. She'd dealt with worse during her Army years before cross-training for this specialized unit. Growing up as the daughter of Chinese immigrants in a small Montana town had taught her early that some people would judge her before she ever opened her mouth. The military had been both better and worse than her hometown. Better because merit was supposed to matter, worse because when prejudice showed up, it wore the mask of tradition and unit cohesion. "Lieutenant Chen," the sharp voice of Commander Robert Hayes cut through the morning air. Sarah turned crisply and saluted. Hayes was the commanding officer of the K-9 unit, a stern man in his 50s with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Sir, you're up for kennel inspection this morning. Master Sergeant Brooks is waiting for you." "Yes, sir." Sarah jogged toward the kennel facilities, feeling the eyes of Hendricks and Davis burning into her back. She heard their laughter but didn't slow down. Master Sergeant Tom Brooks was one of the few people on base who'd treated Sarah with basic respect. He was a career military man, 28 years in, with a weathered face and gentle hands when it came to the dogs. He stood outside the kennel building, clipboard in hand. "Morning, Lieutenant," he greeted her with a nod. "Good morning, Master Sergeant." Brooks walked her through the facilities, explaining the routine as they went. There were 12 dogs currently in training: German Shepherds, Belgian Malinois, and one particularly stubborn Dutch Shepherd named Rex. "Rex there, he's been through 3 handlers," Brooks explained as they stopped in front of a large kennel. The dark-coated dog inside watched them with intelligent amber eyes. "Smart as they come, but he doesn't trust easy. Washed out 2 guys who thought they could muscle him into obedience." Sarah crouched down slowly, not making direct eye contact with Rex. She'd learned years ago that dominant eye contact could be taken as a challenge by some dogs. Instead, she angled her body sideways, making herself less threatening. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly. "Nobody's going to muscle you into anything." Rex's ears perked forward, and after a long moment he approached the front of the kennel. His nose worked through the chain link, taking in her scent. Brooks watched with interest. He doesn't usually warm up that fast. "Animals know when you're genuine," Sarah said simply. "They don't care about politics or who thinks you belong somewhere. They just read your intent." "Wish more people were like that," Brooks muttered. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of routine tasks. Sarah helped with feeding schedules, cleaned kennels, and assisted with basic obedience training for the younger dogs. She was in her element here. The dogs didn't care that she was female, didn't care that she was the only Asian American officer in the unit, didn't care that the other handlers whispered behind her back. They cared that she was fair, consistent, and genuinely loved the work. Lunch was always the worst part of Sarah's day. The mess hall turned into a social minefield where the invisible lines of acceptance and rejection became visible in seating arrangements. Sarah had learned to grab her tray and find a corner table, usually eating quickly while reviewing training manuals on her tablet. Today, as she settled into her usual spot, she overheard a conversation that made her pause. "Did you hear? They're bringing in a new batch of SEALs fresh from Bud S," someone was saying. 6 of them getting their K9 certifications. Great, more newbies to babysit, Hendricks complained loudly. Bad enough we got diversity hires now. We're gonna have puppies straight out of basic training thinking they're hot stuff. Sarah kept her eyes on her food, but her jaw tightened. The term diversity hire had followed her like a shadow through her entire career. Never mind that she'd scored in the top 5% of her class in tactical operations. Never mind that she had a degree in animal behavior psychology. Never mind that she'd volunteered for 2 deployments in Afghanistan. To men like Hendricks, she'd always be just a box someone checked to meet a quota. The afternoon brought a welcome distraction. Commander Hayes announced a full unit meeting for 1500 hours, 3 o'clock. Sarah filed into the briefing room with everyone else, taking a seat in the back row. Hayes stood at the front, his posture military straight. Listen up. As some of you have heard, we have 6 new operators joining us tomorrow for K9 certification training. These men have completed Bud S and are among the top of their class. They'll be here for 8 weeks, and during that time, they'll be paired with dogs and trained in tactical K9 operations. He clicked a remote, and photos appeared on the screen behind him. 6 young men in uniform, all with the lean, hard look of SEAL candidates. Sarah studied their faces, wondering which of them would wash out. K9 training had a high failure rate, even among the elite SEALs. Lieutenant Chen, Hayes said suddenly, and Sarah snapped to attention. You'll be assisting with the basic handling training for the first 2 weeks. There was an audible groan from somewhere in the room. Sarah kept her face neutral, but inside, her stomach knotted. This was either a vote of confidence or a setup for failure. With Hayes, it was hard to tell. Problem, Hendricks. Hayes's voice could cut through steel. No, sir, Hendricks replied, but his tone said otherwise. Just wondering if the lieutenant has enough experience for that kind of responsibility. Hayes's eyes narrowed. Lieutenant Chen has successfully trained and deployed with military working dogs in combat situations. She has more field experience than half this room. If you have concerns about her qualifications, I suggest you review her service record. Otherwise, keep your opinions to yourself. Dismissed. The room cleared quickly, but Sarah felt the weight of resentment as the other handlers filed past her. Brooks caught her eye and gave a small nod of support, but he was one man among many who saw her as an intruder. That evening, Sarah returned to the kennels alone. It was after hours, but she had clearance, and honestly, the dogs were better company than most humans right now. She made her way to Rex's kennel and found the Dutch shepherd lying near the front, watching the door as if he'd been waiting for her. Can't sleep either, huh? She asked softly, unlocking the kennel door. This was against protocol. Handlers weren't supposed to interact with unassigned dogs without supervision. But Sarah had learned that sometimes the best connections happened when no one else was watching. Rex stood and approached cautiously. Sarah sat down on the concrete floor, letting him come to her at his own pace. After a few moments, he sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not quite touching. You know what it's like, don't you? Sarah whispered, reaching out slowly to stroke his head. Rex allowed the touch, even leaning into it slightly. Being judged before anyone knows you, being written off because you don't fit what they expect. The dog's amber eyes seemed to understand. Sarah felt the tension of the day begin to drain from her shoulders. Here, in this quiet space with this misunderstood animal, she didn't have to prove anything. She could just be. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, she told Rex. 6 new guys coming in, all of them probably thinking they're going to teach me something about how things should be done. But you know what? We're going to show them. Not by talking, not by fighting back against the insults. We're going to show them by being so damn good at our jobs that they can't ignore us. Rex made a soft sound, almost like agreement, and rested his head against her knee. Sarah sat with him for another hour, finding peace in the simple companionship of a creature who didn't judge. She didn't know it then, but this connection with Rex would become the foundation of everything that followed. In the coming weeks, this dog, this supposedly untrainable, too aggressive, washed-out animal, would prove to be not just her ally, but her salvation. When she finally locked up the kennel and headed back to her quarters, Sarah felt more centered than she had in weeks. Let them doubt her. Let them whisper and mock. She knew her worth, and soon enough, they'd see it too. The stars were bright over Coronado that night, the Pacific Ocean, a distant whisper of waves against the shore. Sarah stood for a moment outside her building, breathing in the salt air, preparing herself for whatever tomorrow would bring. She had no idea that tomorrow would bring Petty Officer Jake Morrison, a rookie SEAL with kind eyes and a secret that would change everything. She had no idea that within weeks, she'd be standing in a circle of hostile men, with an injured K-9 bleeding out on the ground, and that everything she'd worked for would hang in the balance of a single whispered word. But tonight, she was just a soldier preparing for another day of proving herself, and that was enough. The 6 new SEALs arrived at 600 hours the next morning, their faces eager and nervous in equal measure. Sarah stood with the other handlers in the training yard as Commander Hayes conducted the initial briefing. She studied each of the newcomers, trying to get a read on them. 5 of them had the swagger Sarah had come to expect from freshly minted SEALs, that particular combination of earned confidence and youthful arrogance that came from surviving one of the military's toughest training programs. They stood in a loose cluster, joking quietly among themselves, their eyes scanning the facility with the assessment of operators evaluating new terrain. The 6th man stood slightly apart from the others. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with sandy hair cut military short and eyes that seemed older than his face. While the others joked, he watched and listened. His name tag read Morrison. "Gentlemen," Hayes began, his voice carrying across the yard. "Welcome to K-9 operations training. For the next 8 weeks, you will learn to work with military working dogs in tactical situations. These animals are not pets. They are weapons, teammates, and in some cases, they will be the only thing standing between you and a catastrophic failure in the field." He gestured toward the assembled handlers. "These men and women are the best handlers in the Navy. You will treat them with respect and learn everything they have to teach you. This is not BUD-S. You cannot muscle your way through this training. Working with a K-9 requires patience, consistency, and the ability to build trust. If you cannot do these things, you will wash out." Sarah saw a couple of the new guys exchange glances at the word, woman, and she braced herself for the inevitable comments. "Lieutenant Chen," Hayes called out, and Sarah stepped forward. "You'll take Morrison, Davis, and Kowalski for basic handling this morning. Master Sergeant Brooks will take the others." As the group divided, Sarah heard one of the guys mutter something that included the words babysitter and affirmative action. She ignored it, focusing on the 3 men now standing in front of her. Morrison met her eyes directly, and she was surprised to see no hostility there, just honest curiosity and what looked like respect. Davis, no relation to Lieutenant Davis, was a stocky guy from Texas with a friendly grin. Kowalski was from Chicago, built like a linebacker, with arms that suggested he spent a lot of time in the gym. "Good morning, gentlemen," Sarah said crisply. "Follow me." She led them to the training kennels, very aware of their eyes on her back. This was always the critical moment, the first impression that would set the tone for everything that followed. "Before we bring out any dogs," Sarah began, turning to face them, "I need you to understand something fundamental. Everything you learned in BUD-S about being the toughest, the strongest, the most aggressive, you need to set that aside. Dogs don't respond to dominance the way humans do. They respond to trust, consistency, and clear communication." Kowalski raised a hand. "Ma'am, no disrespect, but aren't these dogs trained for combat? Don't they need to see strength?" "They need to see confidence," Sarah corrected. "Not aggression. A handler who tries to dominate a dog through force creates either a fearful animal or an aggressive one. Neither is useful in the field. What we need are dogs who trust their handlers enough to follow commands in the most chaotic, dangerous situations imaginable." She walked them through the basics, how to approach a dog, how to read body language, how to establish communication without words. Morrison asked thoughtful questions. Davis listened intently. Kowalski seemed skeptical but willing. After an hour of theory, Sarah decided it was time for practical application. We're going to meet some of the dogs in training. Remember what I said about body language and approach. She brought out 3 dogs, a German shepherd named Atlas, a Belgian Malinois named Luna, and Rex, the Dutch shepherd who'd bonded with her the night before. Morrison's eyes lit up when he saw Rex. That's a beautiful dog. This is Rex, Sarah said. He's been through 3 handlers and washed them all out. He's smart, strong, and doesn't trust easily. In a lot of ways, he's the perfect test case for what I've been teaching you. She demonstrated the proper approach, showing them how she angled her body, kept her voice calm and even, and let Rex come to her. The dog responded immediately, pressing against her leg in a gesture of trust that had taken days to build. Who wants to try? Sarah asked. Davis stepped forward first. He followed Sarah's instructions carefully, moving slowly and speaking softly. Atlas, the German shepherd, approached him cautiously and eventually accepted a gentle touch. Davis grinned like he'd won the lottery. Kowalski went next with Luna. He was more tentative, clearly out of his comfort zone, but the Malinois was patient with him. After a few minutes, Luna sat beside him, allowing him to stroke her head. That left Morrison and Rex. Fair warning, Sarah said. Rex is the hardest. If he doesn't like you, he'll let you know. Morrison nodded and approached the Dutch shepherd with impressive calm. He didn't try to rush, didn't try to force contact. He simply sat down on the ground a few feet away and waited. Rex watched him with those intelligent amber eyes, head tilted slightly. The dog took a step forward, then another. Morrison didn't move, didn't reach out. He just waited. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 2 minutes, Rex closed the distance and sat down next to Morrison. The seal slowly extended his hand, letting the dog sniff it thoroughly before attempting to pet him. Well, I'll be damned, Sarah murmured. In all the time she'd worked with Rex, she'd never seen him warm up to someone so quickly, except for her. Morrison looked up at her and smiled. It was a genuine smile, reaching his eyes, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. This man was different from the others. The rest of the morning session went smoothly. Sarah taught them about feeding routines, exercise requirements, and the basics of obedience commands. All 3 men paid attention and asked good questions, but Sarah found her eyes drawn to Morrison again and again. There was something about the way he moved, the way he listened, that set him apart. During the lunch break, Sarah was surprised when Morrison approached her in the mess hall. Mind if I join you, Lieutenant? He asked, tray in hand. Sarah glanced around, nodding the stares from the other handlers. Are you sure you want to do that? You might catch whatever social disease I apparently have. Morrison sat down anyway. I'm not worried about what other people think. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Morrison said, You're really good with the dogs. I could tell you've been doing this a long time. 6 years, Sarah replied. 3 deployments, Afghanistan twice, Syria once. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Combat zones with K9s. Bomb detection, patrol work, search and rescue. Military working dogs do it all. She paused. What made you want to get into K9 operations? Morrison set down his fork, his expression growing distant. My older brother was Army. He worked with K9s in Iraq. His dog saved his entire unit when they were ambushed, alerted to an IED before they walked into it. My brother made it home. But his dog didn't, took shrapnel protecting him. Sarah felt her chest tighten. I'm sorry. His dog's name was Shadow, Morrison continued. My brother said Shadow was the bravest soldier he ever served with. When I decided to join the military, I knew I wanted to work with dogs, wanted to honor what Shadow did. They talked for the rest of the lunch period, and Sarah found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since arriving at Coronado. Morrison didn't see her as a diversity hire or an outsider. He saw her as a fellow soldier who loved the same work he wanted to learn. As they left the mess hall together, Sarah didn't notice the dark look on Chief Hendricks's face or the way Lieutenant Davis's jaw tightened. She didn't see the wheels turning in their minds, the resentment building into something dangerous. All she noticed was that, for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel alone. The afternoon training session was more advanced. Sarah had the 3 SEALs practice basic commands with the dogs: sit, stay, heel, come. Morrison continued to work with Rex, and the bond between man and dog seemed to strengthen with each interaction. "You're a natural," Sarah told him during a water break. "Rex doesn't usually trust people this fast." "Maybe he recognizes a fellow outsider," Morrison said, then seemed to catch himself. "Sorry, that probably sounded presumptuous." "No," Sarah said slowly. "I get it. Are you an outsider in your team?" Morrison glanced over at where the other SEALs were training with Brooks. "Let's just say I don't always fit the mold. My teammates are good guys, but we don't always see eye to eye on things." Sarah understood that feeling all too well. As the day wound down, Commander Hayes approached Sarah with an unusual request. "Lieutenant, I need you to take primary responsibility for Morrison's K-9 training. He shows exceptional promise, and I think you're the right person to develop that." Sarah tried not to show her surprise. "Sir, wouldn't it be more appropriate for one of the senior handlers?" "I'm not interested in what's appropriate," Hayes interrupted. "I'm interested in what's effective. Morrison responded to your training better than anyone I've seen in months. You'll work with him one-on-one for the next 6 weeks, in addition to your other duties." It was an honor and a burden at the same time. More time with Morrison meant more opportunity to teach, but it also meant more visibility, more chances for the other handlers to criticize her methods. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. "I won't let you down." Hayes looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I know you won't, Lieutenant." Dismissed. That evening, Sarah returned to the kennels to find Morrison already there, sitting outside Rex's enclosure. The dog was pressed against the chain link, as close to Morrison as he could get. "You're dedicated," Sarah observed, walking up beside him. "I wanted to spend more time with him," Morrison said. "Build the trust, like you said. Hope that's okay." "It's more than okay. It's exactly what a good handler should do." Sarah unlocked Rex's kennel. "Want to try some free work with him, off-leash in the training yard?" Morrison's face lit up. "Really?" They spent the next hour in the empty training yard as the sun set over California. Sarah coached Morrison through advanced commands, watching as Rex responded with increasing enthusiasm. The dog's whole demeanor had changed. Where he'd been cautious and guarded before, now he was engaged and eager. "I've never seen him like this," Sarah admitted. "You two have something special." Morrison crouched down, and Rex immediately came to him, pressing his head against Morrison's chest. The SEAL wrapped his arms around the dog, and Sarah saw genuine emotion in his eyes. "My brother told me," Morrison said quietly, "that when you find the right dog, it's like finding a piece of yourself you didn't know was missing. I think I understand what he meant now." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. This was why she did this work, these moments of pure connection between handler and dog, the building of trust that transcended words. "Lieutenant Chen," Morrison said, standing up, "I know some of the guys around here don't treat you right. I've heard the comments. I want you to know that I don't feel that way. You're the best handler I've seen, and I'm grateful to be learning from you." "Thank you," Sarah said, and meant it. "That means more than you know." As they walked back toward the main buildings, Rex trotting happily between them, Sarah felt a sense of hope she hadn't experienced in months. Maybe things were changing. Maybe having Morrison as an ally would make a difference. She had no way of knowing that the kindness between them had been noticed. That jealousy and resentment were brewing in the hearts of men who saw her success as a personal affront. That in just a few short weeks, everything would come crashing down in a moment of crisis that would test not just her skills, but her very right to wear the uniform. For now, though, walking through the cooling evening air with a good man and a loyal dog, Sarah Chen allowed herself to feel something she rarely did: contentment. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah and Morrison became a common sight around the base: the female lieutenant who didn't fit in, and the rookie SEAL who seemed not to care about fitting in himself. They spent hours in the training yards, developing Morrison's skills and deepening his bond with Rex. The Dutch Shepherd had transformed from an untrainable problem dog into a responsive, eager working K9, and everyone could see it. Not everyone was happy about it. Chief Hendricks watched from a distance one morning as Sarah guided Morrison through an advanced search and recovery drill. Rex was performing flawlessly, finding hidden targets with speed and precision. Morrison's handling was confident, his commands clear, and the trust between man and dog was evident in every interaction. "She's making us look bad," Hendricks muttered to Lieutenant Davis, who stood beside him with arms crossed. "She's making you look bad," Davis corrected. "You're the one who said Rex was untrainable. You're the one who washed out 2 handlers on that dog." Hendricks's jaw tightened. "That dog was aggressive and unresponsive. I followed proper protocol." "Your protocol was yelling and yanking on a choke chain," Davis said bluntly. "Chen's method is working because she actually knows what she's doing. Maybe that's the problem. She's showing up everyone who said she didn't belong here." "Whose side are you on?" Hendricks demanded. Davis sighed. "I'm not on anyone's side. I'm just statting facts. The woman knows her stuff. Morrison's going to complete this certification, and Rex is going to pass deployment readiness. That's a win for the unit." "It's a win for her," Hendricks spat. "She gets the credit, gets the recognition, and then what? More women transfer in, more dilution of standards. This is a SEAL support unit, not some social experiment." Davis started to respond, then shook his head. "Believe what you want, Chief. I've got work to do." As Davis walked away, Hendricks stood alone, watching Sarah and Morrison. An idea was forming in his mind, dark, petty, and born of wounded pride. If he couldn't discredit Sarah's methods directly, maybe he could create a situation where her inexperience would show itself, where she'd be forced to fail in front of everyone. The opportunity came 2 days later during a routine training meeting. Commander Hayes announced that there would be a full-scale tactical exercise in 3 weeks, a simulated combat scenario where the K9 teams would need to clear a hostile area, locate simulated explosives, and extract under fire. "This will be the final test before certification," Hayes explained. "Each handler dog team will be evaluated on communication, tactical effectiveness, and decision-making under pressure. It's a pass-fail exercise. Teams that don't meet standards will not deploy." Hendricks saw his chance. As the K9 unit's senior enlisted advisor, he was responsible for helping design the training scenarios. If he could make Sarah's test difficult enough, add complications that would rattle a less experienced handler, she might make mistakes. And if she made mistakes, Morrison would fail. The untrainable dog would wash out another handler, and Sarah's reputation would be damaged beyond repair. That evening, Hendricks volunteered to help design the tactical exercise course. He worked late into the night, studying Sarah's training reports, looking for weaknesses to exploit. He noted that while she was excellent at basic handling and obedience work, her combat scenario experience was all overseas, in desert environments. She'd have less familiarity with the type of urban warfare simulation they'd be running. He also noticed something else in Morrison's file. The young SEAL had a minor medical notation about a previous shoulder injury from Bud S training. Nothing serious, already cleared for full duty, but Hendricks filed that information away. Every weakness was potential ammunition. Meanwhile, Sarah was unaware of the plotting against her. She spent her evenings reviewing tactical scenarios with Morrison, preparing him for the final evaluation. They'd moved beyond handler dog training into genuine friendship, something Sarah hadn't expected and hadn't realized how much she needed. "Tell me about Montana," Morrison said one evening as they walked the training paths with Rex. The dog trotted between them, calm and happy, a far cry from the tense, guarded animal he'd been weeks ago. Sarah smiled. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. You don't talk much about your life before the military." She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I grew up in a town called Havre. Population about 9,000, mostly white, very rural. My parents owned a small restaurant, Chinese food in the middle of cattle country. We were one of maybe 3 Asian families in the whole town." "That must have been hard," Morrison said. "It was complicated," Sarah admitted. Some people were wonderful. They loved my parents, loved the food, treated us like neighbors. Others never let us forget we were different. I learned early to prove myself, to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Sounds familiar, Morrison said quietly. Sarah glanced at him. Your turn, what's your story? Morrison was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. My family is military, going back 3 generations. Dad was Navy, grandfather was Marines, great-grandfather fought in World War II. There's a certain expectation that comes with that legacy. And you didn't meet those expectations, Sarah asked gently. I met them in the ways that mattered to me, Morrison said. Made it through Bud S, became a SEAL. But there are other expectations about who you're supposed to be, how you're supposed to act, what kind of life you're supposed to want. Let's just say I don't always color inside those lines. Sarah understood the weight of that statement. In the military, especially in elite units like the SEALs, there was pressure to conform to a certain image. Stepping outside that image, even slightly, could mean isolation. Well, for what it's worth, Sarah said, I think you're doing just fine being exactly who you are. Morrison smiled at her, and in that smile, Sarah saw genuine warmth and gratitude. It struck her how rare those expressions had become in her life, how long it had been since someone looked at her with simple, uncomplicated kindness. They were so focused on their conversation that neither of them noticed Hendricks watching from the shadows near the kennel building, his face twisted with contempt. The next 2 weeks passed in intense preparation. Sarah pushed Morrison hard, running him through increasingly complex scenarios. Rex performed brilliantly, but Sarah knew that the final evaluation would test them in ways training never could. There would be noise, chaos, simulated gunfire, smoke, all designed to create the confusion and stress of real combat. You're ready, Sarah told Morrison during their last practice session before the evaluation. You and Rex have the strongest bond I've seen in years. Trust that bond, trust your training, and you'll be fine. Morrison looked at her seriously. What about you? What about me? Who's evaluating you? Hayes. Sarah nodded. The commander evaluates all the handlers during these exercises. Why? Just seems like there's a lot of pressure on you, Morrison observed. You're training me. You're still dealing with the cold shoulder from most of the unit, and now you've got to prove yourself all over again in this evaluation. Welcome to my life, Sarah said with a wry smile. I've been proving myself since I was 5 years old and the kids at school made fun of the way my lunch smelled. I'm used to it. Doesn't mean it's right, Morrison said firmly. Doesn't mean you should have to. Sarah felt a flutter in her chest, warmth, appreciation, and something else she didn't want to examine too closely. Morrison was a good man, and good men had been rare in her life. Thank you, she said simply. The night before the evaluation, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios in her mind. At 200 hours, she gave up and went for a walk, ending up at the kennels as she always did when stress got too heavy. She found Rex awake, packing in his kennel. The dog's ears perked up when he saw her, and his tail began to wag. Can't sleep either, she asked, letting herself into his space. Rex immediately came to her, pressing his solid weight against her legs. Sarah sat down on the concrete floor, and the dog lay beside her, his head in her lap. Tomorrow's a big day, she told him, stroking his dark fur. A lot of people are hoping we fail. Some of them have probably been working to make sure we do. But you know what? We're not going to give them that satisfaction. Rex made a soft sound, his amber eyes reflecting the dim security lights. You and Morrison are going to be amazing together, Sarah continued. I can feel it. You found your person and he's found you. That's the whole point of this work, creating those bonds that save lives when everything goes to hell. She sat there for another hour, finding peace in the dog's steady breathing, in the simple trust of an animal who'd been labeled untrainable and proved everyone wrong. It reminded her that labels didn't define you, your actions did. When Sarah finally returned to her quarters, she felt centered and ready. Whatever tomorrow brought, She would face it with the same determination that had carried her through every challenge in her life. She had no idea that Hendricks had spent his evening finalizing his sabotage, that he'd added complications to the course specifically designed to overwhelm her, that he'd planted doubts in Commander Hayes's mind about whether a female officer could really handle the stress of evaluating a SEAL candidate in combat conditions. The trap was set, and tomorrow it would spring. But Sarah Chen had survived worse than the petty machinations of insecure men. She'd survived racism, sexism, combat, and the death of dreams. She'd survived by being better than she had to be, by working harder than anyone expected, by never giving up no matter how many people told her she didn't belong. Tomorrow would be no different. As dawn broke over Coronado, Sarah stood in her dress uniform, checking her gear one final time. In a few hours, she'd be in the training field, and everything she'd worked for would be on the line. She thought of her parents, who'd crossed an ocean to build a life in a country that didn't always welcome them. She thought of all the women who'd come before her in the military, breaking barriers and paying prices she'd never fully know. She thought of Morrison, who saw her as a mentor and a friend, not as a diversity hire or an outsider. And she thought of Rex, the dog everyone said was untrainable, who'd found his way to trust through patience and genuine connection. "Let's show them what we're made of," Sarah whispered to her reflection. The tactical evaluation course was set up in the North Training Area, a maze of buildings, vehicles, and obstacles designed to simulate an urban combat zone. Sarah arrived at 600 to find the other handlers already gathered, checking equipment and preparing their K9 partners. Morrison stood with Rex, both of them calm and focused. He caught Sarah's eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of confidence. Commander Hayes called everyone to attention and explained the day's structure. Each handler dog team would run the course individually, evaluated on tactical decision-making, K9 control, and mission effectiveness. The scenarios included explosive detection, hostile tracking, and area clearance under simulated fire. "Handlers, you will each evaluate your assigned trainee," Hayes continued. "Your assessment counts for 50% of their final grade. The other 50% comes from the performance metrics we track during the exercise." Sarah's stomach tightened. She hadn't realized she'd be responsible for half of Morrison's final grade. That was an enormous responsibility and an enormous opportunity for anyone who wanted to undermine her. Hendricks stepped forward to explain the course layout. As he talked, Sarah studied the map, and something felt wrong. The urban environment was far more complex than any of the practice courses they'd trained on. There were multiple levels, narrow passages, and what looked like confined spaces that would be challenging for K9 operations. "Chief Hendricks," Master Sergeant Brooks spoke up, "this seems more advanced than the standard certification course." "These men are SEALs," Hendricks replied smoothly. "We need to ensure they're ready for the worst-case scenarios. We're not going to lower standards just because—" He caught himself, but everyone knew what he'd been about to say. Just because a woman designed their training. Sarah kept her face neutral, but Morrison's jaw tightened. She could see him fighting the urge to say something. The first 3 teams ran the course with varying degrees of success. Each one took roughly 45 minutes to complete all the objectives. The dogs performed well, but Sarah noticed that several of the scenarios seemed designed to confuse rather than test. Multiple false targets, contradictory information, unnecessarily complex clearance patterns. Then it was Morrison and Rex's turn. Sarah walked with them to the starting point, doing a final equipment check. Morrison's tactical vest was secure, his communication gear functioning. Rex wore his working harness, his body language alert and ready. "Remember," Sarah said quietly, "trust Rex's nose over everything else. If he alerts to something, believe him, even if the scenario doesn't make sense. The bond you two have built is your greatest asset." Morrison nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And Morrison," Sarah waited until he met her eyes, "you've got this. You're one of the best natural handlers I've ever trained. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." A smile flickered across Morrison's face. "Same goes for you, Lieutenant. You're the best teacher I've ever had." The exercise began. Sarah watched from the observation post as Morrison and Rex entered the course. They moved well together, Morrison using hand signals to direct Rex while maintaining tactical awareness of his surroundings. The dog's training showed in every movement, focused, controlled, responsive. The first objective was explosive detection in a simulated marketplace. Rex cleared the area methodically, alerting to 3 hidden training devices. Morrison marked each location and reported them correctly. Perfect execution. The second objective was more challenging, tracking a hostel through a multi-building complex. This was where Sarah started to see Hendrix's sabotage at work. The scent trail led through a partially collapsed structure with unstable flooring and tight crawl spaces. It was dangerous even for training, unnecessarily so. Morrison hesitated at the entrance, assessing the risk. Sarah held her breath. This was the test. Would he push forward recklessly or make the tactical decision to find another approach? He chose wisdom over bravado, circling the building to find a safer entry point. Rex picked up the scent trail on the other side and led Morrison through a clearer path. It took longer, but it was the right call. Hendrix, standing near Sarah at the observation post, made a note on his clipboard. "Delayed decision-making," he muttered, "could cost lives in a real scenario. Could save lives by not getting the team killed in a structural collapse," Sarah countered. That was good tactical thinking. Hendrix glared at her but said nothing. The third objective was the critical one, area clearance under simulated fire. Morrison and Rex had to clear a building while smoke machines and blank rounds created chaos. This was where most teams struggled, where the stress overwhelmed either the handler or the dog. Morrison entered the building with Rex at his side. The smoke was thick, visibility near zero. Sarah could see on the monitors as Morrison used hand signals, keeping Rex close, working room by room. Then something went wrong. Through the smoke, Sarah saw Rex suddenly pull hard on his lead, dragging Morrison toward a corner. The dog was alerting frantically to something, his entire body rigid with urgency. "What is he doing?" Hendrix demanded. "There's no target in that corner. The dog's confused by the smoke." But Sarah knew better. She'd seen that exact body language from Rex before. That wasn't confusion. That was a genuine alert. "Something's wrong," she said, reaching for the radio. "We need to check that corner." "The dog is wrong," Hendrix insisted. "Morrison needs to regain control and complete the objective." On the monitor, Morrison was trusting Rex, moving toward the corner despite the lack of marked targets. The dog was digging at something, whining urgently. Then they heard it, a crack, a groan of stressed metal. "Everyone out," Sarah screamed into the radio. "Structural failure, north building, evacuate now." Morrison grabbed Rex and ran. They burst through the door just as a section of the building's interior collapsed. A support beam that had been weakened during setup, something that shouldn't have happened, something that should have been checked, crashed down exactly where they'd been standing seconds before. The simulation halted immediately. Emergency crews rushed in. Morrison stood in the dirt, Rex pressed against his legs, both of them breathing hard. Sarah ran to them, her heart in her throat. "Are you okay?" "We're fine," Morrison said, his voice shaky. Rex knew, he knew something was wrong. Commander Hayes was already on the radio, demanding to know how a support structure had failed. Master Sergeant Brooks was checking the building, his face grim. "This wasn't an accident," Brooks called out after his inspection. "This beam was marked for replacement 2 weeks ago. It should never have been part of the training course." All eyes turned to Hendrix, who'd been responsible for final course safety inspection. "I followed the checklist," Hendrix said defensively. "Everything was cleared." "Everything except the north building," Brooks countered, holding up a clipboard. "Which is conspicuously missing from your safety report." The silence was heavy. Sarah felt sick. Hendrix had been so focused on making the course difficult that he'd skipped crucial safety checks. Morrison and Rex could have been killed. "Chief Hendrix," Hayes said, his voice dangerously quiet. "My office." Now, everyone else take 30 minutes. We'll resume evaluations with proper safety protocols. As Hendricks stalked off, Sarah knelt down beside Rex, running her hands over the dog to check for injuries. He was fine, just stressed by the commotion. Morrison crouched beside her. "That dog saved my life," he said quietly. He knew that building was unsafe before any of us did. "He trusted his instincts," Sarah replied. "And you trusted him. That's exactly what I've been teaching you." Morrison looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You've taught me more than dog handling, Lieutenant. You've taught me what real leadership looks like." Before Sarah could respond, they heard shouting from the direction of the command building. Through the window, they could see Hendricks gesturing angrily, Hayes standing firm with arms crossed. "This isn't over," Morrison said. "Hendricks is going to blame everyone but himself." "Let him," Sarah said, standing up. "The truth speaks for itself. That dog performed exactly as trained, and you made the right call trusting him. Your evaluation is going to reflect that." But even as she said it, Sarah felt the weight of what had happened. This near disaster had revealed the depth of Hendricks's resentment. He'd been so determined to see her fail that he'd compromised safety. The question now was what Hayes would do about it. The answer came faster than anyone expected. 10 minutes later, Hayes emerged from the command building and called everyone to gather. "Chief Hendricks has been removed from this evaluation and will face a board of inquiry regarding safety protocols," Hayes announced. "Master Sergeant Brooks will take over as senior evaluator for the remainder of the day." There was a collective exhale of tension. Sarah caught Brooks's eye, and he gave her a slight nod of respect. "Morrison and Rex," Hayes continued, "your performance up to the point of the structural failure was exemplary. The fact that your K9 detected a hazard that our safety inspection missed is a testament to both the quality of the dog and the quality of the training. Your evaluation will reflect that." Morrison stood straighter, and Rex's tail began to wag. "Lieutenant Chen," Hayes turned to Sarah, "your training methodology has produced the best results this unit has seen in years. Rex, a dog that 3 previous handlers failed to certify, is now performing at deployment-ready standards. That speaks to your skill and dedication." Sarah felt a rush of vindication, but she kept her expression professional. "Thank you, sir." The rest of the day's evaluations proceeded smoothly. Morrison and Rex completed their course with near-perfect scores. The bond between them was undeniable. When the final simulated firefight erupted, Rex stayed calm and focused, responding to Morrison's commands, even amid the chaos of smoke and noise. As the sun set on the training field, Sarah stood with Morrison and Rex, watching the other teams finish their runs. It should have felt like a victory. Hendricks was facing consequences, Morrison was succeeding, and her training methods had been vindicated. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was brewing. She'd made an enemy today, not just of Hendricks, but of everyone who shared his views about women in the military. Men who saw her success as a threat to their way of life. "Penny for your thoughts," Morrison asked, joining her at the fence line. "Just thinking about what comes next," Sarah admitted. "Hendricks isn't going to go quietly. He has friends, people who think like him." "Then we'll face them together," Morrison said simply. "You, me, and Rex, we're a team now." Sarah looked at the young seal, at the loyal dog sitting between them, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real, genuine hope that maybe things could change. That maybe merit and skill could overcome prejudice and politics. She had no idea how wrong she was. How in just 3 weeks, everything would come crashing down in a moment that would test not just her training, but her very survival. How Morrison would have to make an impossible choice, and how a single whispered word would mean the difference between life and death. But tonight, in the fading California light, with a good man and a loyal dog beside her, Sarah Chen allowed herself to believe that justice was possible. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the advanced training facility for what was supposed to be a routine K9 demonstration. Morrison had completed his certification with top marks, and Rex had been officially designated as deployment ready. Commander Hayes had requested a demonstration for a group of visiting military officials, a showcase of the unit's capabilities. It should have been a triumph. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. The demonstration began well enough. Sarah coordinated, while Morrison and Rex performed complex tactical sequences. The visiting officials were impressed by the precision and control displayed by the handler dog team. Even the other handlers seemed grudgingly respectful. But Chief Hendricks was still on base, waiting for his board of inquiry. And he'd spent the last 3 weeks nursing his resentment and gathering allies. The demonstration called for a simulated hostage rescue. Rex would locate and alert to a hidden hostile, and Morrison would execute the tactical response. It was a routine exercise they'd practiced dozens of times. What Sarah didn't know was that Hendricks had convinced Lieutenant Davis to make a modification to the training dummy used as the hostile. Instead of the standard scent marker, they'd use something that would trigger an aggressive response in most K9s, a scent that mimicked an active threat. Rex entered the building, Morrison close behind. Everything proceeded normally until Rex reached the target room. Then the dog's entire demeanor changed. His hackles rose, his lips curled back, and he let out a warning growl that Sarah had never heard from him before. "Rex, hold," Morrison commanded, but the dog was locked onto the dummy, perceiving it as a genuine threat to his handler. Sarah realized instantly what was happening. "Morrison, pull back. The scent marker is wrong." But it was too late. Rex, doing exactly what he'd been trained to do when protecting his handler from a threat, lunged at the dummy. The force of his attack sent him crashing into a piece of equipment, and there was a sickening crack as his shoulder hit a metal support beam. The dog yelped and went down. "Rex!" Morrison dropped to his knees beside the injured K9. Sarah ran into the building, her medical kit already in hand. The visiting officials and other handlers crowded around the entrance, blocking the light. Rex was conscious but clearly in pain, his breathing rapid and shallow. His left front leg was bent at an unnatural angle, definitely broken, possibly worse. But more critically, he was showing signs of shock, and his training made him perceive everyone except Morrison as a potential threat. Sarah tried to approach to assess the injury, but Rex snapped at her, his amber eyes wild with pain and confusion. "He won't let anyone near him," Morrison said, his voice tight with panic. "Sarah, what do I do?" The crowd at the entrance grew larger. Sarah could hear Hendricks's voice among them. "The dog's out of control. This is exactly what I warned about, inadequate training creating dangerous animals. Someone needs to sedate that dog before it attacks," another voice called out. "No sedation," Sarah snapped. "He's in shock. Sedating him without stabilizing could kill him." She tried again to approach Rex, speaking in soothing tones, but the dog was beyond recognizing anyone except Morrison. The problem was that Morrison, for all his skills, didn't have the medical training to treat Rex's injuries. He could comfort the dog, but he couldn't save him. They needed to work together, Morrison to keep Rex calm, Sarah to provide treatment. But the dog wouldn't allow it. "Lieutenant, you need to step back," one of the other handlers said. "Let us handle this." "Nobody touches this dog except me and Morrison," Sarah said firmly. She knew that in his current state, Rex would perceive any stranger as a threat. It would take someone he trusted completely to keep him calm during treatment. She looked at Morrison, and an idea formed. It was risky, possibly career-ending if it backfired, but Rex was running out of time. "Morrison, listen carefully," Sarah said, her voice low and urgent. "There's a protocol for situations like this. A code name system that creates deep-level bonding in military working dogs. It's not standard training. It's something I learned from a handler who worked in classified operations." Morrison's eyes locked on hers. "What do I need to do?" When a dog is paired with a handler for high-level operations, they're trained to respond to a specific code name, a word that means absolute trust, absolute safety. It overrides fear and pain response. I've been using it with Rex in our private training sessions. This was partially true. Sarah had developed a deep bonding technique based on her research into animal psychology, but she'd never shared it officially because the methods were unconventional. Using it now, in front of officials and other handlers, could be seen as either innovative or as proof that she'd been training dogs improperly. "The code name for Rex is Shadow," Sarah said, and Morrison's eyes widened with recognition. The name of his brother's K9 who died in Iraq. Sarah had used it deliberately, creating a connection between Morrison's past and his present. "Say the word to him," Sarah instructed. "Use the tone I taught you in week 4 of training, calm, firm, absolute confidence. Then tell him to trust me." Morrison turned to Rex. The dog was trembling now, his eyes glazed with pain. Morrison placed his hand gently on Rex's head and leaned close. "Shadow," Morrison whispered, his voice carrying all the weight of memory and meaning. "Shadow, I'm here, you're safe." Rex's ears flickered. His wild eyes found Morrison's face. "Shadow," Morrison repeated, stroking the dog's head. "Lieutenant Chen is going to help you. Trust her like you trust me. Shadow, trust." It was a long shot. The crowd had gone silent, watching. Sarah could feel their skepticism, their judgment. If this didn't work, it would be proof that her methods were flawed, that she'd endangered both the SEAL candidate and the dog. But slowly, incredibly, Rex's aggressive posture began to soften. His breathing evened out slightly. When Sarah moved closer this time, Rex didn't snap. His eyes stayed locked on Morrison, but he allowed Sarah to examine his injured leg. "Good boy, Shadow," Morrison kept murmuring. "Good boy, we've got you." Sarah worked quickly and efficiently. The break was clean, painful, but treatable. She stabilized the leg with a splint from her kit, administered pain medication, and checked Rex's vitals. Throughout it all, Morrison continued his gentle litany of reassurance, using the code name like an anchor. "He needs surgery," Sarah announced, "but he's stable. We can transport him to the veterinary hospital." The emergency veterinary team arrived within minutes. As they prepared to load Rex onto a stretcher, the dog's eyes went wild again. "Morrison has to go with him," Sarah said. "He won't stay calm for anyone else right now." "Negative," Commander Hayes said, stepping forward. "Petty Officer Morrison has responsibilities here. We have trained veterinary staff." "With respect, sir, Rex is in shock and bonded to Morrison," Sarah interrupted. "Separating them now could cause Rex to hurt himself or the staff. Morrison needs to accompany him." Hayes looked like he wanted to argue, but Master Sergeant Brooks stepped up. "She's right, Commander. I've seen this before. The dog won't make it to surgery if he panics in transit." Hayes gave a curt nod. "Fine, Morrison, go, but I want a full report when you return." As they loaded Rex into the transport vehicle, Morrison looked back at Sarah. The gratitude in his eyes was overwhelming. "You saved him," he said simply. "We saved him," Sarah corrected. "Together." After they left, Sarah turned to face the assembled crowd. She could read the mixture of emotions, some impressed, some skeptical, some openly hostile. Hendricks stood at the back, his face twisted with anger. "Lieutenant Chen," Hayes said, his voice neutral. "My office, now." Sarah followed him to the command building, her heart sinking. She'd revealed an unconventional training method in front of officials. She'd contradicted a superior officer. And worst of all, she'd allowed a dog to be injured during a demonstration, even if it wasn't directly her fault. In Hayes's office, Sarah stood at attention while the commander closed the door. "Sit down, Lieutenant," he said quietly. Sarah sat, bracing herself for the reprimand. Hayes was silent for a long moment, studying her with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Then, surprisingly, he sat down across from her, not behind his desk, a deliberate choice that made the conversation more personal than official. "That code name technique," Hayes said. "Shadow, that's not in any standard training manual." "No, sir. It's based on advanced animal psychology research. I developed it during my deployment in Afghanistan, working with dogs that had trauma responses." "And you didn't think to share this methodology with the unit?" Sarah met his eyes. "With respect, sir, I didn't think anyone would listen. I've been here 3 months, and most of that time has been spent proving that I have a right to be here at all. Introducing unconventional methods would have been seen as another reason I don't belong." Hayes nodded slowly. "You're probably right about that. This unit has been resistant to change for a long time, too resistant." He leaned back in his chair. "What happened today wasn't your fault. That scent marker was modified without authorization. We have witnesses who heard Hendricks discussing it with Lieutenant Davis." Sarah's eyes widened. "Sir, the Board of Inquiry is going to be more extensive than we initially thought. Hendricks didn't just compromise safety in the earlier evaluation. He deliberately sabotaged today's demonstration. He wanted you to fail, and he was willing to endanger a dog to make it happen." "What about Rex?" Sarah asked. "And Morrison?" "The dog will recover. Clean break, good treatment. The surgeon said your field stabilization probably saved the leg from permanent damage." Hayes paused. "As for Morrison, his performance today demonstrated exactly the kind of handler we need. Someone who can stay calm under pressure and make decisions based on the dog's welfare, not ego." "He's going to be an excellent operator," Sarah said. "Thanks to your training." Hayes stood up, and Sarah did the same. "Lieutenant Chen, I owe you an apology. When you were assigned to this unit, I had doubts. Not about your qualifications on paper, but about whether you could handle the social dynamics of a unit that didn't want to change." Sarah waited, not sure where this was going. "You've proven me wrong," Hayes continued. "You've taken a dog that 3 handlers failed with and turned him into one of the best K9s in the unit. You've trained a rookie SEAL to performance levels that exceed handlers with years of experience. And today, you saved a dog's life using methods that, unconventional or not, clearly work." "Thank you, sir." "How would you feel about developing a formal training program based on your bonding techniques?" Hayes asked. "We could use it across the unit, maybe even across other military K9 programs." Sarah felt her chest tighten with emotion. This was what she'd wanted: validation, recognition, the opportunity to make a real difference. "I would be honored, sir." "Good, I'll have you work with Brooks on the curriculum. And Lieutenant," Hayes's expression softened slightly, "I know it hasn't been easy for you here. That's going to change. I'm making it clear to this unit that excellence is what matters, not gender or background. Anyone who has a problem with that can request a transfer." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood on the tarmac watching Morrison and Rex prepare for deployment. The dog's leg had healed perfectly, and the bond between handler and K9 was stronger than ever. They'd been assigned to a SEAL team heading to Eastern Europe, not a combat deployment, but an important mission nonetheless. "I can't believe I'm saying this," Morrison said, adjusting Rex's tactical vest, "but I'm going to miss your inspections and critiques." Sarah laughed. "You'll do fine, just remember everything you learned." Morrison grew serious. "I learned more than dog handling from you, Lieutenant. I learned what it means to stick to your principles even when everyone's against you. I learned that being excellent at your job is the best revenge against people who doubt you." "Your brother would be proud," Sarah said softly. "You and Shadow, you're carrying on his legacy." Rex, hearing his code name, looked up at both of them with those intelligent amber eyes. His tail wagged slowly. "Take care of each other," Sarah added, crouching down to give Rex a final pat. As the transport plane prepared for takeoff, Master Sergeant Brooks appeared beside Sarah. "You know what the guys are saying?" he asked. Sarah braced herself. "What?" "They're saying Chen's training program is the toughest and the best in the Navy. We've got a waiting list of handlers who want to work with you." Brooks smiled. "Turns out excellence is pretty popular once people get past their bullshit." Sarah watched the plane taxi down the runway, carrying Morrison and Rex toward their future. She thought about her journey, the small Montana town, the struggles, the doubts, the people who said she didn't belong. She thought about every obstacle that had been thrown in her path and how she'd cleared each one. But mostly, she thought about the moment in that training building, when a dog was injured and afraid, and she and Morrison had worked together to save him. That moment when trust overcame fear, when skill overcame prejudice, when two people and a dog had proven that bonds built on respect were stronger than any division. 3 months later, Sarah received a letter. It was from Morrison, writing from somewhere in Eastern Europe, the exact location redacted for security. "Dear Lieutenant Chen," it read, "I wanted you to know that Shadow and I completed our first real mission last week. There was a situation, can't give details, but Shadow's training saved lives. When things got chaotic, I remembered what you taught me. Trust the bond, trust the training, trust each other. The guys on my team asked where I learned to work with a K9 like that. I told them about the best handler in the Navy, a woman who took a dog nobody else could train and turned him into a hero. You changed my life, Sarah. You taught me that real strength isn't about being the toughest or the loudest. It's about being the most skilled, the most dedicated, the most true to yourself and your principles. Shadow sends his regards. I whisper his code name to him sometimes, and he gets this look in his eyes like he remembers that day you saved him. I think he knows he's got a guardian angel back in California. Thank you for everything. Your friend always. Jake Morrison. P.S. I hope you're still kicking ass and taking names." Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer, next to her commendations and her parents' immigration papers, reminders of journeys, struggles, and triumphs. Through her office window, she could see the new class of K9 handlers in training. There were 3 women among them now, and nobody was questioning their right to be there. The program she'd developed was being adopted across multiple military K9 units, and Rex's story, the untrainable dog who became a hero, had become legendary. Chief Hendricks had been reassigned to a desk job in logistics. Lieutenant Davis had requested a transfer rather than face the judgment of his peers. The culture of the unit hadn't changed overnight, but it was changing, one handler at a time, one dog at a time, one mission at a time. Sarah Chen had come to Naval Base Coronado as an outsider, doubted and dismissed. She was leaving her mark as a leader, an innovator, and a trainer whose methods would influence military K9 operations for years to come. She'd proven that excellence speaks louder than prejudice, that skill matters more than politics, and that sometimes the strongest bonds are formed between people and dogs that the world tried to keep apart. As she watched the sun set over California one more time, Sarah smiled. She belonged here. She'd always belonged here. It had just taken time for everyone else to see what she'd always known. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more people to prove wrong, more barriers to break. But Sarah Chen had learned long ago that she didn't break easily.